Hey guys, welcome to yet another video on EasySocial. My name is Shobit Taneja and today we will create a job portal experience right within WhatsApp where a user can sign up, look at different job categories that suits his qualifications, find some jobs in that category and finally apply for that job. So to build this entire experience, you must have a programming background or at least you should have a high level understanding of coding. For your reference, the project which I will demonstrate you today is built on core PHP and MySQL database. You will learn how to link your chatbot with external applications. Now this could be a game changer because with this you can extend the capabilities of your website or your application to your customers right within WhatsApp and they don't have the need to download any additional app. This process also gives you a head start when you're a small startup trying to build a prototype. Maybe you're trying to capture your first few clients. Through this method, you can build a proper customer experience in just a matter of few hours. So before we start building the chatbot, we must understand that all the customer's information and the job information of a portal has to be stored somewhere. And that's where the MySQL database comes in. Based on a requirement, we will need different tables to store different pieces of data. First of all, we'll need to manage our users. Hence, we'll need a table to contain all our users' data. Now this table is going to be pretty straightforward. It will have a user ID, it will have a phone number. Now this phone number is going to be used for validation when somebody comes on WhatsApp. You can even have the user's name, password or any other field that you might think is important. Moving onwards, we'll need another table called job categories. This is where we're going to organize all our jobs. So there's going to be category ID for the job, and then there's going to be a particular category. For example, IT and software, marketing and sales. Like that, we can have multiple categories, and having this information in a table gives us the flexibility to add or remove more categories later on. Next, we will have another table called jobs. Now this is the most critical and the core table in our functionality. So in this table, you'll have fields like job ID, you'll have the category ID which links back to the job category table, and then we'll have other fields like title, full description, the company name which is offering this job, the location. It could be like a brief location, like for example the state and the city, and then we could even consider having the latitude and the longitude of that particular office's location, employment type, and even salary if that's available. So this covers our basic requirement for this table. However, if you want, you could add more fields according to your own requirement. Finally, we have a key requirement for storing the job applications. So this table would have fields like the user ID and the job ID. Now this table is not only going to create an entry when somebody applies for a particular job, but it could also prevent the user from reapplying for the same job. So now these four tables are going to be the essential data pillars for our application. Now that the foundation is all set, we can now start building our chatbot. So based on our discussion regarding the tables, I've set up these tables with some dummy data. So if I click on the users table, you'll be able to see that there are few phone numbers and their name is visible here. So now if I go back to job categories, we have some job categories. This is the category ID, this is the name of the category, and there's some other details which might not be relevant in this project. Then we move on to the jobs table. In this table, you can see there are multiple jobs listed here. Now these are all dummy jobs. So every job has a job ID, it has a category ID, which is basically the ID of the categories which are mentioned here in the job categories table. Then there is the title of the job, the company which is offering this job, a slight description, location, latitude, longitude, employment type, salary range, posted at. So all of this information is right here. You're free to customize it based on your requirement. Now moving on, we've got another table called job applications. Currently, we don't have any job applications here. So here you can see there's an application ID, user ID, which will show which user has applied to the job. And then there's this job ID. Now job ID is the ID for the job that he's applied for. And then we've got a column called status. Now status will probably represent if the person has been chosen for the job or not. Now that we have all this information right in front of us, we are all set to get started. So let's build our chatbot. Let's go to EasySocial and then head towards settings, chatbot platforms, WhatsApp and chatbot builder. So we'll create a new chatbot here and we'll start from scratch. Let's click on get started. I'll call this job application and the description will be job portal on WhatsApp. Let's hit save. Our new chatbot is created. Now let's mark this as an active chatbot and we'll edit this. So our first message is going to be a welcome message. We will rename this to welcome. And we'll scroll down and make this a start node and save it. Now let's think a little bit about the entire customer journey. So now what we're looking for is when somebody sends a hi message on this chatbot, first of all, we want to send him a welcome greeting. And then right after that, we want to check if that customer is an existing user of our platform or not. So ideally, what we need to do is we need to use the phone number of that particular user who's sending the hi message, and then we have to look up this table and find if that particular number exists here or not. If that number exists here, then we can actually move on to the next step. If that number does not exist, then we can also build a provision where a user can actually sign up on our platform. So for that, I will create a dynamic API node called the true API true false node, and I'll link it here. Now let's read the documentation for this node. So according to the documentation, I can pass a URL and I can also pass certain variables within this URL. And through this information, I can validate if this particular user is available in my database or not. Once the user is available, then I have to send a particular response. So this is the sample response. There will be a success parameter. The value could be either true or false. You also have an option to send out additional lead attributes in your response. So let's say the user already exists in your database, then not only do you send out the success response as true, you can also send out lead attributes. For example, the name of that customer or any other information that is stored on your database. So here you can, instead of request ID, you can have it as name, and here you could have the actual name of that person. So once that information comes in, it's going to be stored within EasySocial and it can be reused later on. For your ease, I've already created some API endpoints and I won't go into the details of how to program them. You can get that done on your own, or you can take the help of an AI agent like ChatGPT or Google Gemini. I will just quickly browse through the different API endpoints that I've already created. So here I've got a API called validateuser.php. So if I just hit the URL directly, it gives me data success is equal to false, which corresponds to the documentation. Here, if the sample response is false, which means the user does not exist. So I've added a parameter called phone, and if I give a particular value which exists within my database, so then let's see what happens. So it's now returning true, which means if I go back to my database, there is a particular user here with this particular phone number and his name is Ethan Hunt, and this particular number is returning that value. So the response here of this API is true, and the lead attribute, which I told is an additional and an optional parameter. If you want to pass this name, you can give the additional information that you have for that user to EasySocial. So whatever information you have will be saved on EasySocial as well. So this is an optional thing. So I think our first endpoint is working well. Let's copy this and let's go back to our chat flow. Here in the API URL section, I'm going to paste this URL, and here I will delete this phone number. I want to make it dynamic, so I'll enter phone. Now phone is a system variable. It will automatically pick up the phone number of the user who is interacting. So now whatever the phone number gets entered in this URL is going to go to this particular API endpoint, and if this particular phone number exists within this database, is going to return true or false. Now let's add two dummy messages here. First one being true, the user exists. I'll call this true, and I'll duplicate this. I'll call this user does not exist, and I'll also mark both of these as the end node. Let's save it. So now let's go to WhatsApp and try this out. I'll type a 0 to reset the chatbot. Welcome to EasySocial job portal. One thing we've missed here, we have to jump the node to the next node. So I'll just enable the jump node and I'll save it. Now let's go back again and type 0 to reset. So as I do that, it automatically takes me to this message saying the user does not exist, which means that my number is still not available in the database. So now what we need to do is we need to actually create a user. So I'll remove this message which is in the false direction, and I'll add another interactive message. Here I will type, "Dear user, you are not with EasySocial job portal. If you wish to register with us, please click on the button below." Now we have a button here. I'll write sign up and I'll save this. Now this sign up button is going to take me to yet another message where I'm going to ask the name of this person. So I'll connect this here and I'll say, "Please tell me your name to complete signing up." And if I scroll down, I will save this data and I'll save this into a field called name. So once this information is received, I will have to pass it to yet another API which I will use to sign up the user. So I will go back to my cPanel. Here I've created one more API which is the sign up API. So if we edit this, you can see that first we're connecting to the database and then we're getting certain parameters, the name and the phone parameter from the URL itself. And then we're checking if this number already exists within our database or not. If it's not there, then we're going to insert this particular information and create a particular user. For this, we need to again use a true or false node to store the data. So we will use this particular node here, and this time I'll connect it here. And in the URL, I will use this particular URL called signup.php, and I'll paste this here once. My primary URL is this, which I will prefix it, and towards the end I've got two parameters which are defined by me already. One is the name. So I want to send the name here. The name is basically being stored in the previous step and the name field so that I can pass on. And when I need to define yet another variable, I can use an ampersand symbol, and the next value which I am passing on in this URL is phone. Now if you're familiar with basic level of programming, you would know how to use these URL variables. The only thing which is dynamic is this particular value, which is going to be coming directly from EasySocial to this URL. So now whatever name I have entered in the previous step gets passed on here on this step, and then we've got two options. The first option is that the data gets saved. Okay, so let's say the data is saved and we want to connect it to yet another node, and here we will write thank you, and let's say we want to print the name of the user. So we will choose name, thank you name, for signing up. You can now start your job search. And for the time being, I'll mark this as an end node, and I'll duplicate this node and I'll connect it here as the false node. So you need to always have a backup reply, although you would definitely try, test and then deploy everything. But in case you must have a fallback strategy. Let's say your server is down or something, or maybe the network is taking long to respond. In those cases, we can have a fallback response like something went wrong, try after some time. Okay, and I'll scroll down again and I'll save this as an end node. Now let's rename the nodes so that we don't get confused later on. So the first node is the welcome node. Then on the second step, we are validating the user. user exists, and here the user response is false, and we are suggesting sign up. And then on the next step, user provides name. On the next step, we save user details, and on the bottom we have an error response, and let's say this is the user gets saved, so we have signed up. So we have named all the nodes adequately. We'll quickly save this, and then let's again go to WhatsApp and test this out. So I'll hit 0. So since I'm not a registered user, it's taken me to a different branch this time. So first it went here, it validated through this API. It could not find the phone number, so it took me to this branch, and here it is giving me an option to sign up. Okay, so now let's try what happens if I click on sign up. So when I click on sign up, it asks me for my name. So I'll enter my name here. So when I enter my name, it gets saved into the platform. From this step, it passes this information onto the next API node. It has passed my name and my phone number to the API, and this API in turn, if I go to the database and if I click on the users table, so you can see there's a new entry with the same phone number, and also it has added my name here. So now you can understand you've already created a user and you have saved that data right into your database. Let's go back to our chat flow. Now that I'm signed up successfully, let's create the flow where a user can actually look for a job. So first we need to present the user with the job categories that he would want to choose. So I will remove this node here, which was just a temporary node, and I will add another dynamic API. This time I'm going to use API interactive list response, and I'll connect this particular node here. Let's read the documentation for this node. Now this node is expecting data in a particular format. So this is a sample JSON response which corresponds to a list message inside of WhatsApp. So first we have to define that it's an interactive list message, and this is the body text of the message, and below that there are going to be some button which will be clicked and a list will be populated. So this is the title of that button. So once you click on this button, it's going to populate a list which could have multiple sections, and each section would have its own title, and under that there are going to be multiple options available which are clickable. Now these options have three components associated to them. First is the ID, then is the title, and then is the description. Now ID refers to a particular numeric or an alphanumeric value which you can use to internally assess which option has been selected by the user. So why we need IDs is basically if the titles are same or similar, in that case you would not have any confusion because the IDs are going to be absolutely unique. So the title represents what's going to be written on the option, and the description is like a subheading which is written right under the title. The user never sees the ID, it's always hidden. When somebody taps an option, the ID is passed on to the next step. Here the description is an optional thing, so it's not necessary that you have to use description for each item in the row. It is completely optional. Now that we understand the sample response, let's go back to our database. This time around we want to list out all the job categories. So we've got 5 job categories here, and every job category has an ID. So what we want to do is we want to send out a message which will have a button. When someone clicks on that button, it's going to populate a list of all the job categories, and those job categories will be picked from here. And with each job category, we will also be passing the category ID internally. So for this, we've already created an API. So let's have a look at the code of this API. So this API we call the job categories. Let's edit this. So here you can see the connection is being made to the database. So then we're populating the JSON response. Here we have defined that it's going to be a list, and inside the body we have given a text message. Please choose a job category from the options below. Select category is the title on the button. Then we've got a section. In this section we've got this title called available job categories, and then we have initialized rows. So inside rows the data is going to be fetched from the database itself. So here the ID and the title is getting fetched from the database itself, and then it's getting inserted into the rows here, and then finally the output is getting sent to us. So this is the whole overview of this particular API. Let's go back to the chat flow, and here we'll paste the API endpoint. I'll copy the prefix URL, I'll paste it before this endpoint. So here we don't have to use any variable in the URL because it's going to fetch out all the available job categories that there are. And before we test this, I'm going to attach another basic message right below it and mark it as a end node. So remember, I'm always adding another node and marking it as end. This is really important if you want your chat flow to work without errors. So a chat flow cannot be left disconnected. It has to be connected to something or the other towards the end. So now that it's saved, let's go back to WhatsApp. I'll hit 0 again. But remember, this time I'm already signed up user, so it has to take me to the job category branch. So it validated me and it's taken me to this particular branch already. And you can see it's giving me this message, and I have a button called select category, and it's giving me a list of all the categories that are there. Now the next objective is to capture the ID of this particular job that I select. Let's say I select accounting and I hit next. So now I need to know which particular ID did the user select, and then from the category ID I will be able to fetch out the jobs which are available in that category. So that is the next big task. We need to list out all the jobs which are available in that particular category. So let's go back here. I'll disconnect this particular message. I'll add another dynamic API node, interactive list response node, and this node I'm going to use to list out all the jobs. So let's go back to the cPanel. Here we have another API endpoint called job list. So let's quickly review what's happening in this API. I'll edit this. So this is again connecting to the database first. So it is building the JSON flow as required. So here the body text is, here are the available jobs in the selected category. View job details, or we can change it to view jobs. And when somebody clicks on this button, it's going to open a section in which the title would be job listings, and then we are composing the rows on the bottom. From the URL parameter we're getting the category. So if we go down, we are fetching the category from the URL. This category is going to be a numeric ID, which we'll come to in a bit. So if you look here, we're fetching a few URL parameters. The first one is category. So this category represents the category of jobs that the user would like to see. If we scroll down, then we've got another variable, URL variable called limit, is basically the maximum number of results that can be shown in one time. So let's say we've got 30 jobs in that particular category, but you can limit it to something less in one time. Let's say 5 jobs in one go. Then there's another variable which is called page. Now page represents which page do you want to see. See, for example, if we've got 30 responses for that particular job category, WhatsApp has a limitation of showing up to 10 results in one go. So you will have to paginate your results. It cannot be shown all in one go because you will be stuck to the maximum limit, which is 10. So you will have to show the results in different pages. So this URL variable will define which page are we talking about. So we will understand a bit more about it in detail once we start to actually implement it. So if we scroll down further, the data is being gathered from the MySQL database for the different jobs. Once this data is getting gathered, it's getting converted into the JSON format as we require. So after that, there is little more functionality. I would not go into detail right now. Let's just try out already seen so far. So let's go back to the chatbot. First, I will just copy this endpoint and I'll go back to the chat flow, and here I will paste the endpoint files, and this is the prefix URL. I will paste it before the endpoint, and after that we've defined a few variables which we just discussed. So if we go back again, let's see all the variables that we have. So we've got category. So we'll copy this and we'll come back to our chat flow. So we need to first save the category which is being captured on the previous step. So here we are giving a response of all the categories. At this step, if we scroll down, we can save this particular category. So we have a field called job category. So we will save the category ID here. Remember, when you're using the API interactive list response or API interactive button response nodes, in those cases, when you're saving the data, it's going to capture the ID, not the title. So here in our case, the ID is the numeric value of the category, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, any of these. So once I go back to the chat flow, let's click on the next message, which is supposed to show all the jobs. Here towards the end, I'm going to write the job category lead data field. So let's assume the job category is number 4. So it's going to be passed here. And then we've got more URL variables that we need to pass. So the next one is limit. So let's go to the chatbot again. And here we will add limit. And we would hard code it to 9 at the moment. And then we've got one more URL parameter. Let's see what it is called. It's called page. We'll go back to the chat flow now. And we'll add this as well towards the end. So page we will keep as page_1. So this is something which I've defined in my code. You can do anything else. You could have kept it a simple numeric value as well. But for our case, I thought it'll be best to, define it as page_1. We'll come to that little later. You'll understand why I've done it this way. So now let's save this, and also I need to add another basic message right below this. Just mark, I won't change anything. I'll just go down and I'll mark it as an end node. And let's go back to WhatsApp and test this from scratch. So let's select the job category to accounting. Okay, so we've come to from accounting. It's passed all the information to this particular node, and the data which has been passed has gone into the job category. Page limit we've hard coded to 9. We've hard coded to page_1. So that means we've hard coded it to show just one page with maximum 9 responses, and the category is defined dynamically through the previous step. So let's see what options are we getting here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I believe there are 5 entries for this particular. So we've got another option towards the end, which is back to categories. So here you can see we've got 5 options. That is because we only had 5 jobs for accounting here. If I go to jobs, if I look at accounting, yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we had 5 jobs which were related to the accounting category. But apart from the accounting category, we also got an option in the chatbot which is back to categories. So in our code, we had programmed whenever the list reaches its end, then we will print out back to categories, and it's going to have its own unique ID. So in the case of the internal auditor, the ID is going to be 24. For tax specialist, it's going to be 25. But since this is a unique button, back to categories, so we made a unique ID for it. So if I go to the code, so here we've got an ID called back to jobs. So this is the ID that we've defined here, and the title is back to categories. Okay, so now one thing we know for sure, that whenever a job is being selected, the category is a numeric value, and whenever there's a unique button, for example, back to categories, then the ID was back to jobs, which is not a number. So just keep this in mind. Now let's expand the spectrum of this example a bit more. Let's go back to our chat flow. We know we have got like 5 jobs in the accounting category. So we will limit it to 3. So instead of showing 5, we will limit per page only 3 jobs can be shown. So let's see what happens if we do that. Let's go back to WhatsApp. I'll close this and we will reset the chatbot. So I'll select the same accounting category once again. we've got the menu, and you can see we've got just 3 options this time, and we've got one more button, see more jobs. Now this is one more button that we've hard coded. So this button is basically intended to take us to the next page. If I click here right now, I don't think it's going to work. Yeah, so it jumps directly to the next message. It's not taking us to the next page. So we have to make this functionality work. So first let's look at the code, how we've implemented go to the next page option, and then we'll come back to our chatbot and build the capability for switching between pages. So if you go to the job listing page, right above the back to jobs section, we have a section for see more jobs. If the current page is not the last page, then we've added one more response towards the end of the interactive list, which is see more pages. And we want that when somebody clicks on this particular option, it should take him to the next page. The ID that we are passing here is page underscore the next page, the ID of the next page, which is going to be probably page 2 in this particular case. So we need to develop a logic in a chatbot which will understand when somebody clicks on this particular button called see more jobs, then the chatbot will identify, is it referring to going to a new page? And if that is the intent, then it should go back to the new page and show different values to the customer. So let's go back to the chatbot again, and here we will disconnect this, and I'll delete this for now, and I'll go to utility option. Here I'll create if and else condition. I'll move the branch little further away. I'll connect it here. Now, as you know, when we were looking at the jobs here, the different jobs, each job has a numeric ID. However, the see more jobs or back to jobs button, which we saw earlier, have an alphanumeric ID. So our first objective would be to identify these jobs and differentiate them from the additional options. So if I go to this if and else condition, here I have an option called evaluate mathematical equation. So in the previous option, I can actually save this data. So whatever option that is being clicked in this step, I want to store that. So I will store that in selected job. Okay, once this information is stored in selected job, then I want to move to the next node where I will do a mathematical evaluation. So I will check if the selected job lead data field is greater than or equal to 1, because I know that all my jobs have an ID which are numeric. So when somebody clicks on a job, I will get an ID, and based on that ID, I'll be able to understand if somebody's clicked on a job or they've clicked on some additional options. So now right underneath this, I can create a basic message, and here I will write clicked on a job, and here I will write clicked on another button. I'll mark both of these as end nodes. I'll save this, and let's try this again on WhatsApp. So I'll again choose the accounting category. So let's try this. If I click on internal auditor, it has to go to this node which will identify that's coming from a job. So since this ID is a numeric ID, I'm able to filter it out through this condition, where this number, whatever it might be, is going to be always greater than equal to 1. So then this is falling under condition 1, and it's taking me to this branch which is called click the job, and that's how I'm able to navigate specifically when somebody clicks on a job. Now let's assume that the user clicks on the additional option, see more jobs. When the user clicks on see more jobs, now since this is not going to be a number, it is navigating me to the else condition, right? So now that we've been able to filter out between when a person clicks on a job or any other button, we need to again set up one more filter which will tell us if the person has clicked on see more jobs or back to categories. So we need to further precisely identify what the user request was. So we've got two options here. One is back to jobs and the other one is page 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be. So Yeah, so let's go back to our chat flow, and again we are going to put a condition here, utility if and else. So I'm going to add a condition here, match with lead data field. Again, my selected job is going to be either back to jobs, or it's going to be the page itself. If somebody wants to navigate to another page, then it's going to be the page itself. So if somebody clicks on back to job, then I want to go back to the main job list, which is this one. I'll also rename this to all jobs in category. So here we have a second option, which corresponds to see more jobs option. Now, in order to build this capability, we have to go back a little and introduce one more dynamic feature. So when I click on jobs listing, and if I move ahead, you can see that we have a URL variable called page is equal to page 1. I have to make this a dynamic field, which means when somebody enters page 2, this node will show me all the jobs which are on the second page. If I change it to page 3, then similarly the results for the third page will be shown. So I need to make this dynamic. So for that, I first need to break this connection, and I'll introduce a node in the utility node section. There's a node called lead data field utility, and here I will define my first page name. So I will use custom value, and I will call this page underscore 1. So when a new user is coming in for the first time, it's automatically going to reset things to page 1, and I'll save it to a field called page underscore number. Now this page number will be passed on to the job. Here I will, instead of hard coding the value, I will use the dynamic value, which is page underscore number. Now automatically the first page is going to get written here because we have defined the value in the lead data field utility. So after that, the first page will be shown, and let's say when somebody clicks on go to the next page, so then this is going to percolate in this if and else condition. It's going to go to the else condition, and then further from this if and else condition, it's going to again go to the else condition. So here we are going to observe what the user has sent to us. So here we will need to transfer the value of the ID which was clicked here into the field called page number. So again we will create a utility field called lead data field utility. We will connect it from here to here. Maybe I'll keep it down so that it doesn't confuse you. So here in this lead data field utility, I will again use custom value, and since when the button was clicked, the values were getting stored in selected job, so this probably has the value page 2 or page 3. So I need to transfer this value from selected job field, and I want to transfer this value to the page number field. So now let's consider that somebody received a message with, let's say, 4 jobs listed, and then there was another button at the bottom called go to next page. So when somebody clicks on go to next page, probably the ID would be page underscore 2 or page underscore 3. So that information is percolating from this first condition to the next condition, and then to the lead data field utility. And here this value is getting transferred from selected job lead data field to page number lead data field. And once this information is getting transferred, we need to move it back to the job listing page. Okay, which means we will loop back to the same job listing node. Once this happens, again the same job listing node is printed, but this time around the page will be dynamically changed to the page 2, and your API is going to serve all the results which are available on page 2. So again, let's save this, and again we'll test this out. I'll hit 0 to reset. Select category. So accounting once again. Let's click on view job details. Here I won't choose any of these jobs right now. Let's click on see more jobs, and I'll hit send. So it's passing this information from this if and else condition, then again to this next if and else condition, and then finally here. Now just to make it little more understandable, I'll just add another node in between so that you understand what is happening here actually. So I'll add a basic message node and I'll print along the way what information is being actually passed. We are storing the data in selected jobs. I'll copy this and I'll click on basic message. Here I will just print the variable you selected, and then I will click on jump to the next message. Okay, this is a temporary node which is just going to illustrate what we are trying to achieve here. So let's go back to WhatsApp. Let's hit 0 again. I'll select the category again to accounting. Job details. So if I click on see more jobs, it's passing on page 2. This is the value which is getting stored in this particular variable, selected jobs. So now it passed on page 2, which is not a number. So it moved on to the else side of the condition, and then in this particular if and else condition, this did not meet the first condition. The text was page underscore 2. It did not match condition 1. So again it landed up in the else condition. And see, this is the else condition. Once this information went into the else condition, then we copied this information and pasted this information back to page number. And the page number has the new value which is now updated to page underscore 2, and this value is being passed back to the job listing. So you can see if I zoom out, this information is being passed back into the job listing, and then job listing API endpoint is also updated with the latest page number. So once this API is being hit, it is giving us the results for the second page. And here I had used this particular node just to illustrate what the user is selecting. So again, let's go back to WhatsApp, and this time around I'm going to choose a particular job, let's say bookkeeper, and I'll hit send. So since this job is listed in our database and it has an ID 23, this ID is a numeric ID, so it met the first condition here in the if and else condition, and it came to this particular branch. So I hope with this example it made little more sense to you what are we trying to achieve here. So I'll break this node from here right now. I'll move this little down and I'll connect it again, and I'll save this back again. Now that we have been able to first validate a user, register the user, show him different job categories which are available, then we listed out the jobs that are available in the category. We also enabled the pagination here in this step, and we are able to loop him through this particular step until he is able to see all the jobs in that category. Now we have come to the final step, where let's assume the user will shortlist a job and we want him to apply for this job, and maybe also check out the Google location of that job. So let's check how this can be done. This time around we are going to use a different node. Instead of using the list, we are going to use the interactive button response node, and we will move it down here. We will disconnect this particular basic node and we will connect it here. So we're connecting this node here because when any person clicks on a job, it will meet the condition that the ID is going to be a numeric value, and it's going to go to this particular node where we're going to give the customer more insights about this job. So we want to share all the information like the job, the location, what is the salary, when was this job posted, all of that information we want to show. So for this, again, let's go ahead and read the documentation for this node. So according to this documentation, you can see there are multiple things which are supported here. First of all, you'll have to define a different object here inside the data object, which is interactive. The type will be button because this particular message is going to have buttons in it. The maximum number of buttons that you can place are 3. Then there's going to be header on the top. The header could either be text, image, video, or a document. If it's text, then you can simply add an attribute called text, and then you can just pass in all the text that you want to write here. If it's going to be an image, then you can, instead of using text, you will only use image. You can use one of these, not all of them, just one of these types. Then once you add the image type, then you will have to define the link, the path of the image URL. Now this image path has to be a publicly available URL. This path cannot be of a Google Drive image. It has to be hosted on a server. I mean, if you can open this URL directly on a browser, and if it's opening properly, then that's the correct URL. That's what's going to render in your message. Same for video. If you are using the type as video, then you can embed the link here. If it's a document, then you can provide the link here of the document, and also you'll have to put the file name. For example, what do you want to call the file? Let's say presentation.ppt or proposal.pdf. Going down, then you've got the body section of the message where you'll be able to provide the text of the body, and then below that there are going to be buttons. So buttons are defined within the action object, and then in each of the buttons the type has to always be reply, and under reply and within reply and within the reply object you can define ID and the title. So ID is going to be again unique. It can be numeric, it can be alphanumeric. The user will not be able to see the ID. It's only for internal purposes to understand the option that the user has clicked on. And below that, at the bottom, there's an option for footer. Footer is going to be a small grayed out hint text which will appear at the bottom of the message. Now that the structure is clear to you, let's go to the database. So here we've got the jobs listed here. So here you can see we've got the job category, title, company name, description, location, latitude, longitude, employment type, the salary range, posted at. So all of this information is available with us. Now I've already created an API to represent all of this information in a button response. So if I go back to the file manager, so here I have an endpoint called job details. Let's edit this and have a quick look. So here in this file, first the database connection is being made. Then through the URL variable, the ID of the selected job is being fetched. Once this is fetched, then a database query is happening where all this information regarding the job is being fetched, and then the message is getting composed. Once the message is ready, then it is generating the JSON, and in that JSON there are 3 buttons. First one is apply now, which is to apply for a job, and it has a hidden ID called apply_now. And then there's a second button which is view on map, and it has a hidden ID called view_on_map. And then there is the third one which is back to jobs. So again it has a hard-coded ID called back to jobs. So these are the 3 buttons which are going to be rendered in this message. Then finally this particular JSON is being assembled. So now that we have understood this, so let's copy this endpoint and go back to our chat flow. Here I will paste this endpoint and I'll copy the prefix URL. I'll paste it here, and after that we have an ID. So this ID represents the job that a user has selected. So right now it is being saved in this field called selected jobs, and I need to paste it within the ID parameter. So now this ID will be passed in this API. Okay, so I will save this, and I'll also add a message underneath it. And I'll also mark it as an endnote just so that things don't go haywire. Okay, now this is done. I'll go to the chatbot and I'll hit 0, and let's see what the response is. Let's choose the job category, accounting again I'll choose, and this time I'll use internal auditor. So this has passed on the ID of this particular job to the next API, which is job details, and job details has composed this particular message for us, which is giving us the title of the job description, company, location, the pay, the type of job, when what was it posted. Apart from that, it's also giving us 3 buttons. Now these buttons haven't been mapped yet, so let's see how you could dynamically map these buttons. So if I come back here again, I'll delete this node. So I'll have to put a utility node if and else condition, and I'll connect it here. Before I do anything else, I'll have to save the user's response. So I'll scroll down and I'll save it in a field called job action. So whatever action he took on the job, I am going to save it in this field called job action. And Now I will be able to use this particular value from the job action field. So I'll use match with lead data field, and here I will choose job action. Here I will define some conditions, the first one being apply now, and let's go to the job details page again. The next one is view on map. This is the next ID. So again, I'll go back to the chat flow and I'll set the new condition, and it's going to be view on map. And else I'm considering could be used for the third option, so I don't have to define it here. And this third condition basically is a way to go back to the jobs menu. I can just drag this and take it back to the top where we are going back to the main jobs category. I'll just save this once. Scrolling down, I will now connect these two conditions. The first one is apply now. Let's hold that for a bit. I'll just connect a dummy node here and I'll mark it as an end node. And then we've got the next node, which is view on map. Here I want to create a node to call the geolocation, and it's going to show the actual physical location of that office to our users. So I'll double click here and you can scroll up, and again let's go and read the documentation. So this is the expected response for API geolocation node. The first attribute is longitude. Longitude and latitude are basically going to be the individual values for that particular location. Name stands for the title of that particular office. Then we've got the address. Address is where this particular office is situated. So considering this sample response, we've created another API for this. So this API is called job location. I'll edit this so that you can have a look. So again, we're connecting to the database. Then through the URL, we're passing the ID of the job, and through this ID, we are able to fetch the latitude and the longitude, company name, and the location text from the jobs itself. Once this data is received, we're able to create the expected JSON response. So I'll close this and I'll copy this API endpoint, job location, back to the chatbot. I'll close these pages as well. So here I will paste this particular endpoint. I'll copy the prefix URL again. I'll paste it back again here. Again, I have to define the URL parameter ID is equal to, which is going to be the same as the selected job. I'll go back here, go to the end, paste it here. Alright, so this is done. So once this location is being sent, I want it to go to yet another message. I'll save this once again. So I'll create another message, button response, and I'll connect it here. I'll write, what would you like to do next? Then I'll add a few buttons. Apply for the job. Then other one could be back jobs. Now when somebody clicks on back to job, it's going to take him again back to the main jobs category. Now let's build the final functionality, apply for the job. So this is basically the last functionality that we want to create here, and once we do this, we will also be able to test this geolocation API. I'm not testing it because this is still open towards the end. This button response does not have a proper closure. So I will first build this functionality, apply now, and then once that functionality is created, so I will link them both together, and then we will be able to test this functionality as well as the geolocation functionality. So now assuming that the person has the option here to click on the button called apply now. So once he does that, we want to give him a confirmation that he has already successfully applied for the job. We'll also give him a reference number that he has successfully applied. At that point, we want to create an entry in the database. So if I go back to the database, so we have got job applications table here. So here we can create the entry where we will enter the user ID, the job that he's applied for, that job ID will be mentioned here, and he will be issued an application ID. So this ID we will present to the user in the next message. So for this, we've already created an API. Let's go and check this out. It's called apply for job. I'll edit this right now so that you can understand this better. So first we are creating a connection with the database, and if I scroll down, we are getting some information from the URL parameters. One of them is the job ID and one is the phone number. Now this phone number will be used to search in the user table and find the ID for that particular phone number. So for example, this is the phone number. Somebody enters this phone number. First, the code will try and find the user ID. So this user ID in combination with the job ID is going to get stored within this job application. And once this data is stored, an application ID will be generated, which in turn is going to be presented in the message. Now we want to show this by the means of API basic message node. So we will just create that API basic message node here, and I'll connect it here, and let's go and check out its documentation. So for this node, the sample response is very straightforward. There's going to be a data object, and then in a body text attribute, you just need to mention the text that you'd like to print. Now let's go back to the API and we'll copy this API endpoint and we'll go back to Chatbot. Let's paste the API endpoint here and we'll copy the prefix URL. We'll again prefix it to this endpoint, and towards the end we need to pass two variables. One is phone, which will be this, and the other one is job ID. So let's put the job ID here, and from the previous API response, let's find the variable. It is selected job. I'll copy this and I'll paste it here. So the selected job lead data field is going to print the ID of the job in the URL. So I think that's about it, and now I can scroll down further and mark it as an end node. Let's save this and also move it a little bit lower, and we'll connect this to the button. So when anybody clicks on this button at the bottom, apply for the job, then also it's going to lead to the same message. And if somebody clicks on this response where we show all the details regarding the job, then also it's going to go to the same message. Now let's check this out in action. Let's go to WhatsApp. Let's clear everything once. Okay, now let's type in 0 to reset the bot. Choose the category. Let's choose the first job. We've got all the job details now. Let's apply for this job. So as you can see, we got a congratulations message, plus we also got a response saying your application ID is 4. So with this, we have added yet another capability where we are adding information to the job application table. So if you see here, this particular row has been added. The user ID 12 and the job ID 24 has been added to this row, and the application ID 4 has been assigned to this application. So if I go back again to our WhatsApp, now let's try view on map. As you can see, when we clicked on view the map, it gave us the exact location of the organization on a proper map. So with this, we have learned a lot about using the deep integration capabilities of EasySocial. We were not only able to build an engaging chatbot, but we were also able to interact with the data in real time. I'm sharing with you all the files which were being used in this particular project. In the description section, you can download from the link provided. Plus, if you're building even more complex capabilities and you're not able to find the right way to do it, reach us out in the comments, or you can even contact our customer support. We'll be happy to provide you a solution. Thank you for using EasySocial as your trusted WhatsApp automation platform. We'll see you in the next one.